Ladies, gentlemen, and Spiritborn of all ages, with Season 8 coming up in just a few days, you are probably working out what class you want to play to start it all off, and for those of you who are looking to choose Spiritborn, or at least considering it an option, today we're going to go over an extremely solid leveling build to help you get up to level 60 as smoothly and quickly as possible, and help you sort of transition and progress into the torment difficulties as well, of course. This season is going to offer us a lot of bonus power potential through the boss power system, which we'll be able to start building up towards even while leveling, but our long-term goals in Season 8 for pure power on Spiritborn are all pointing towards a poison Quill Volley setup focused around the seasonal Ashava boss power and the crazy interactions that has with the Noxious Resonance key passive. That said, that's our long-term goal on Spiritborn in Season 8, that's your endgame setup, and today is about your leveling build. It's about how you get there, it's what you actually use on the way. And with this, we'll be shifting back into a sort of standard Quill Volley core skill leveling experience too, to keep them somewhat close and make it easy to transition from your leveling build into your endgame build, so this will be closer to what we did back at the start of Season 6, specifically the first time Spiritborn was available. All that said, let's break down where we put our skill points and why, our spirit hull choices for the build, our legendary aspects and gear choices, our early boss power decisions, our mercenary choices as well, and then the very beginning of your Paragon with those first 28 points that you unlock when hitting level 60. And we will talk about how and when to upgrade to what should prove to be a ridiculously strong poison setup as well. Starting off at the top then, let's talk about your skill tree, and as we enter here I want to preface that saying our main goals in this leveling build are moving quickly, whether that be jumping from enemy to enemy or literal raw movement speed, and frequency of hits, as Spiritborn has some majorly strong ways of synergizing with quick hits. That said, we start with our basic skill, which is going to be Thrash for three main reasons. The first is that it leaps to enemies when used, so this gives us some nice consistent movement when moving from enemy to enemy in more dense content like Helltides. The second is that its third hit effect does multiple bonus hits on top of the main one. This fits into our goals of just really high frequency of hits, as many hits as possible in as little time. The third reason is Sharp Thrash, which is the enhancement that we'll be taking here, and this makes the third hit effect of Thrash give 2 stacks of ferocity whenever you trigger it. This gives us more attack speed, which directly results in more damage, and again, more frequent hits in general. We then move on to our core skills here, and we'll be picking up Quill Volley. This sends out quite a few feathers in a cone shape in front of you, which each count as their own hit. We then take Enhanced Quill Volley to make enemies vulnerable when hit with at least 3 feathers at once, giving them a debuff that increases the damage you do to them, and then we also take Advantageous Quill Volley. This makes it throw out even more feathers per cast for more hits, and also 10% increased damage to the enemy per feather that hits them, which stacks up to be quite a hefty bonus if you sort of use it at close range. So both of these enhancements make it optimal to play this as close range as possible to your enemy. Get right up in their faces and blast them with the full barrage, hitting them with every feather mere inches from their face. From here, you want to put your next 4 points directly into Quill Volley itself to increase the damage of our main skill, as this core skill is our main damage source at this stage of the leveling journey. We then go to the next section and we'll be picking up Soar as our main movement skill ability here. Thrash, our basic skill, carries you short distances if you have a target to hit it with. Soar is more just for raw movement, allowing you to move large distances in quick bursts, or even hop over things like terrain or walls as well. This doesn't require a target to be used against either, so you can use this just when traveling in between enemies, or when doing things like dungeons or traveling like that. We then also take Enhanced Soar, as this gives you a guaranteed critical hit against any enemy that is struck by Soar, which is nice in itself, but the main reason that we want this early is if Soar does not hit an enemy, you just gain 50% bonus movement speed for 3 seconds afterwards. And again, as we are mostly using this just to speed up our general traversal between combat, adding 3 seconds of significant bonus speed on each cast is a massive boost to that specific goal. After that, we're going to be grabbing the Ravager skill here. This gives you a minimum threshold of ferocity stacks, so we gain some more consistent attack speed in general as a result, but then the active part of this skill makes every attack trigger a bonus hit and do some bonus damage. This adds to our overall hit count and frequency a significant amount while active, which will synergize with our Spirit Hull choice once we are high enough level to unlock that mechanic. We then are going to be grabbing the enhancement for Ravager here, which just increases the skill duration per kill that you get while it's active, and then Measured Ravager, which for Quill Volley mostly just increases your vigor generation duration by 30%, which is very useful for resource management. From here, we're going to be grabbing 1 rank of the Focal Point passive here, which generally speaking, we're going to be using quarterstaves. For this will just give us some extra block damage reduction, but for the most part, while leveling, you just want to use whatever the highest weapon DPS weapon you have that drops for you. This also works as a gateway for the most part to unlock the ability to put points into Apex as a passive, and we will be taking 3 ranks in this for 9% increased damage against vulnerable enemies with a doubled bonus against elite enemies. Again, we're going to be making pretty much every enemy that we're fighting vulnerable because of the way that we are using Quill Volley, so this is incredibly potent within this build. After that, we're going to be picking up counterattack in the next cluster over here, and this passively increases your dodge chance as well as dealing damage to enemies whenever you dodge an attack from them. The active portion of this skill makes you dodge all attacks for 3 seconds. This is useful, but the main reason that we have this is for the passive effect that we'll be getting from the enhancement. Specifically, enhanced counterattack gives you a reduced cooldown on the active part of the skill based on how many ferocity stacks you have when casting it, but then importantly, reinforced counterattack gives us a critical damage multiplier per close enemies, and this stacks up to a very hefty amount when you have a bunch of enemies around you. After that, we're going to be putting 2 points into the Mirage passive back up here for some increased dodge chance while we are evading, but also increased critical strike chance after we dodge, because we will be dodging a fair amount in our current setup. We then put 1 point into the Patient Guard passive over here, which is a bonus to sort of passive 10% block chance, which is nice defensively, but this should line up perfectly so that your next skill point will be at level 15, which is when you unlock Spirit Hall Primary Choice. For leveling, we'll be going with the Gorilla Spirit as our primary choice, which makes all Spiritborn skills count as Gorilla skills on top of their original Spirit tag. It applies your Thorns stat as damage to every hit that you do with Gorilla skills, which is now all of our skills, as well as giving you some barrier each time that you cast a Gorilla skill as well, and again, this is all of our skills. The Thorns damage on hit is a large part of why we are maximizing frequency of hits while leveling as our main offensive goal, especially as you can get very good Thorns while leveling as it scales very hard compared to most other stats in the early game. So essentially, the moment you get this Spirit Hall choice, your main goal for a stat on your armor as you progress is to find as much Thorns as you can. You want to use the Iron Barbs elixir and have that active as much as possible as well, as that gives a ton of Thorns as well for lower level play. And importantly, our next 3 skill points on the skill tree are going to go into the Bastion passive, which gives you a decent chunk of flat Thorns stat as an increase, as well as a 20% multiplier increase on your Thorn stat while you have a barrier active, which we will be maintaining also through Gorilla Spirit Hall. These things put together will now give you a massive power spike, and especially if you can keep the Iron Barbs elixirs active once you unlock them at level 20, you will start to really just burst through enemies very easily for the next stages of your leveling journey. After that, we move on to pick up our ultimate skill, which is going to be the Hunter, mostly because it is a multi-hit ability to trigger our Spirit Hall damage effect. Because of its enhancements as well, which we'll also be taking, you get an overflow on your ferocity charges when you activate this skill for bonus attack speed after casting, and it will give you bonus damage to injured enemies as well, which is just generally useful. It also gives you a chance to reset the cooldown of the main skill itself if you kill an enemy during its active duration. This means that you can often use this ultimate skill 2, 3, even 4 times in a row during general mobbing content where you're killing little low-level enemies quickly and moving from pack to pack, and it also enables some further synergy that we go into afterwards too. We then put 2 more skill points into the Hunter itself to reduce its cooldown a little bit as the main goal there, which then unlocks key passives for us too. For this build, we're going to be taking Adaptive Stances as a key passive. This gives us a different bonus after casting a skill depending on which base spirit tag the skill has. All of our skills are base spirit Eagle or Jaguar. Eagle Spirit gives 30% bonus movement speed, which is fantastic for general traversal and makes it quicker to level in general, whereas Jaguar Spirit skills give attack speed after casting, which is especially useful to have work with our basic skill, as it means that we generate resource faster when we need it. As well, when we swap the active buff, meaning when we use an Eagle skill after a Jaguar skill, or a Jaguar skill after an Eagle skill, we get a 50% bonus to all core stats for 7 seconds afterwards. So we'll have that buff active pretty much permanently just from the way that the build plays naturally, increasing our damage in various ways and also our defensiveness. So this is a pretty solid increase on its own. From here, we put the 2 remaining points into the Hunter Ultimate, giving it a further reduced cooldown, and importantly, giving it the effect that makes it able to execute non-boss enemies, which helps activate its self-cooldown resetting effect as well. We're then going to be picking up a bunch of passives within this cluster too, starting with all 3 ranks of the Resolution passive for increased damage to elites for a few seconds after casting your ultimate ability, doubled if you are only fighting one enemy, which generally means against bosses. With the Hunter getting cooldown resets, we can actually keep this active quite often, a lot more often than you might expect. We then grab 1 rank of Spiritual Attunement right here for some extra maximum vigor, but mostly just to let us get 3 ranks of the Supremacy passive for a stacking damage buff whenever you get kills during an ultimate skill's duration, with bonus stacks being granted when your ultimate skill ends, making it work great with our choice of ultimate skill being able to potentially be used multiple times in a row. We then pick up Measured Soar over here as an enhancement to give us 4 seconds of the Unstoppable buff after casting so that we can't be affected by crowd control. We then also grab 3 ranks of the Unrestrained Power passive for a 12% bonus damage while we are unstoppable. To make that combo work even better and more consistently, we'll be taking 1 rank of the Sustenance passive for some healing when hitting enemies with our ultimate skill into 3 ranks of Intricacy. This passive lets you freely cast your last used skill of these categories after you use an ultimate skill. The way that we use this is with either Soar or Ravager. For traversal, using Soar, this lets us cast Soar to then first enter a pack of enemies, then use the Hunter to slaughter them, and by doing it in this order, you get 3 free casts of Soar to then use over the next 7 seconds for significant movement potential. If you manage to get a reset on the Hunter before doing this, you can then chain it even further by just again using Soar before your next Hunter. If you are against some tougher enemies or doing a boss or such instead, you want to use it with Ravager instead, as you can use this to make sure that you keep 100% uptime on the Ravager buff by using the free cast to reset the duration before the timer ends. And this is a very solid damage bonus in sustained combat, mostly because of what we're about to be taking here, which is 3 ranks of the Potent passive. This stacks up a debuff on enemies whenever they are hit by a Jaguar skill. This causes them to take more damage in general after the fact, and we stack up this debuff mostly through Thrash, through the Hunter itself, and then of course through all of the bonus hits that trigger from Ravager from any other skill that we cast, because the bonus hits from Ravager count as applying Jaguar damage, so they stack up this debuff. We then get 3 ranks of the Brilliance passive as well for increased Eagle skill damage dependent on our movement speed bonus. We grab 3 ranks of the Resilient passive to give us 15% bonus maximum life for 10 seconds after casting a Gorilla skill, and because our Spirit Hull choice means all of our skills count as Gorilla skills, this will always be active in this current setup. We then grab 3 ranks of the Diminishment passive up here for reduced damage taken from vulnerable enemies, because we'll be making all of our enemies vulnerable and it's nice to have at least a bit of defense from our skill tree. We'll then be grabbing the final rank of Mirage here for a little bit of extra dodge chance while evading and more crit chance after a successful dodge. Then we'll be grabbing 3 ranks of the Acceleration passive for 1 bonus evade charge, which is, nice in general, as well as 24% increased Eagle skill damage for 2 seconds after an evade, which also syncs up with our crit chance after a dodge and dodge chance while evading to give you some nice stacking buffs that trigger at similar times. Then for our final 4 points, we'll be grabbing just a little bit of Vigor Management, as our attack speed should be ramping up by this stage, so we take 3 ranks of Vigorous for just increased vigor generation after casting a core skill, and 1 rank of Velocity, just for some passive vigor generation while moving as well, because you'll be doing that all the time, and this just makes it nice when you first start combating a pack of enemies. That does it for our skill tree then, and the order that we take everything, so let's jump into the Spirit Hull choices for this setup. For the primary Spirit Hull, as mentioned earlier, we are going to be going with Gorilla for now, for the Thorns damage and the barrier generation on hit. For secondary Spirit Hull, Jaguar is better for us for bossing specifically, as it lets you consistently build ferocity stacks when you are hitting a boss, and increases your maximum ferocity stack potential in general, as well as giving you ferocity stacks whenever you kill enemies. For general mobbing and leveling gameplay outside of bosses though, I prefer Eagle secondary Spirit Hull, which gives you a growing crit chance boost while you are moving. Then that bonus persists for 4 seconds after you get a crit, so if you move a bunch when you're going between packs of enemies while moving around, you can easily get 4 seconds of guaranteed critical hits as a result. That said, I generally recommend using Eagle for most content and then switching back to Jaguar for bosses specifically, but if you don't want to bother swapping back and forth constantly, you can just run Jaguar permanently, as we should be more than strong enough for mobbing anyways while leveling. It's just sort of an extra layer of optimization potential. Following that, then let's talk about our seasonal powers, because this is where things start to get very, very interesting. While leveling, we expect to take part in the Apparition Incursion seasonal event. This can give you the 10 lowest tier boss powers for the season, so we'll talk about the best among these options if you grab them while leveling. But then we also need to talk about a world boss power on the off chance that that boss happens to spawn and you kill it before reaching level 60. As we of course don't know the spawn order of the world bosses on launch day ahead of time, so we can't really predict if this will happen while you're leveling or not. That said, for the more generalized low tier powers, and in keeping with our general setup, you want to use whatever you get first, as some bonus is of course better than no bonus. But once you start to have choices among the lower tier, Skurg's Toxin is our best early main power choice, as none of the others really synergize with this setup, but this should be especially good for more single target scenarios, and again we are using the main power of this one, which just applies poison damage when you get hit. As for the powers you'd use as modifiers, you want Hatred's Embrace Haste, and we will likely even keep that one on for our whole journey this season, as this gives 5% bonus crit chance increased based on your shadow resistance, which you will slowly be building up naturally anyways. We also want to grab Flesh Reaper's Disruption as a modifier for increased damage to vulnerable enemies, as we apply that debuff to all enemies in combat, and this is increased damage as well depending on any crowd control duration bonuses that you might have. Then for our final modifier slot, we want Cineratt's Flames, which give you increased damage with all elements. This applies to everything that we do except for the Thorns damage itself and the poison from Skurgs, and this modifier is boosted further by element resistance that you get as well. This, however, is where things get a little bit funky, as our best power this season is looking to be Ashava's Poison Breath, especially as this was actually buffed since the PTR, rather than being nerfed like most of the other boss powers. So if Ashava spawns before you hit level 60, and if you manage to kill him before hitting level 60, you will get this power earlier than you might expect. And if that happens, you want to make some pretty immediate swaps within the build to take advantage of using it, but it still synergizes extremely well with our setup as a whole, as our main offensive goal was hit frequency, and this boss power directly synergizes with hit frequency by giving you a poison wave triggered on each hit that you get against an enemy that is currently affected by damage over time effects. So if you get this power, you want to stick it in your main power slot to actually make it function. Then we would be swapping our main Spirit Hall Guardian over to Centipede so that we apply poison on any skill usage, which then makes the boss power work through minimal thought or effort. We then also would be swapping our key passive in the build over to Noxious Resonance instead of Adaptive Stances in order to make this work properly with our actual poison effects, because what this does is make critical hits against poison enemies burst to do their built up damage over time value instantly, as well as 20% of that value as an area of effect attack to hit enemies that are near them as well. The damage then also scales infinitely with your critical damage bonus, which is part of why this gets so strong in the endgame as well. Then we just reallocate the 3 points from the Resilient passive, as we're no longer caring about Gorilla skills, we're not casting Gorilla skills, so it doesn't help, and we put those in Ravenous instead for the bonus damage with Centipede skills and extra bonus against healthy enemies, especially because all skills will now count as Centipede skills thanks to the primary Spirit Hall swap. On which note, if you do this and you have the Unyielding Hits legendary aspect, which we'll mention later, you would want to replace Thrash as your basic skill and instead use Rock Splitter as your basic skill instead, which also lunges at enemies but is a gorilla skill to help keep triggering that super powerful legendary aspect even after we change Spirit Hall choices. Another shift for the build is if you get the Ring of the Midnight Sun, which makes the passive effect of counterattack active permanently, as well as some other fantastic effects, mostly centered around resource generation, which is of course great, but if you take this on, it enables you to keep the bonus critical damage effect from counterattack without having it on your skill bar. So if you get this unique, we take counterattack off of our active skill bar, we don't take any skill points out of it, but we then would move 3 skill points so that we can take Scourge instead as an active skill for our bar to apply crowd control and poison damage to enemies, enhance Scourge for an increased damage to crowd control enemies multiplier while the debuff is running, and then also adaptable Scourge for lucky hit chance to heal when hitting an enemy that is affected by Scourge. Past that, we have our legendary aspect recommendations as well, and while legendaries were dropping all over the place while leveling in last season in Season 7. In Season 8, the developers have made a point of lowering legendary drop rates in the early section of the game. So we're going to be going back to only building in 3 main aspects in our leveling builds, as it will just be too resource intensive to recommend putting legendaries in like every other slot while leveling now, and of course keeping them updated with new pieces of equipment and all of that. So we are only putting aspects on our jewelry slot specifically, as you can go a very long time without replacing your jewelry without losing a lot of power, unlike weapons or armor, which hold a lot more stats that matter during early progression. That said, one of our recommended aspects is going to be RNG related, which is the unyielding hits aspect that we mentioned before for Spiritborn. This gives you increased weapon damage after you cast a gorilla skill based on your armor. The higher you stack your armor, the larger this gain will give you. The aspect does not have a guaranteed source of dropping, however, and so whether you get to use this while leveling or not depends entirely on your RNG, on how lucky you get. If you do have this drop, if you can use it, you want to put it on a ring. Then you want to go and pick up the aspect of disobedience as well, which is a guaranteed codex aspect, and use that on your amulet, as this will give you a massive chunk of armor to funnel into unyielding hits during combat. Aside from that, you also want the rebounding hits aspect as early as you can, essentially, as this gives you extra hits with Quill Volley, forcing the quills to rebound back to you and hit the enemies a second time, as well as causing explosions at the apex and when they return. So this is just solid overall for a Quill Volley focus setup, which of course we are. You can stick this on your other ring, with it going into the codex after you complete the Forge of Malice dungeon in Nahantu. Aside from that, if you get Plains Power as a random drop aspect before you find unyielding hits, you definitely want to stick this on instead, as it's also great but also not a guaranteed drop. And if you don't have those drops but really feel like you need some sort of orange item on your remaining jewelry slots, then go pick up the Edge Masters aspect for bonus damage on skills based on how full your resource is when you cast them. As for tempering, I wouldn't worry about this too much while leveling, but if you do want to do weapon tempering while leveling, you are looking for chance for Quill Volley to cast twice, which of course fits perfectly within our setup. And then for offensive tempers, you want to stack gorilla damage specifically from the Gorilla Finesse manual when you are using the Gorilla Primary Spirit Hull, as it increases the damage of all of our skills as they are counting as gorilla skills. Then whenever you are able to get the Ashava boss power and make all those swaps, you'd instead want to focus on critical strike damage increases for all of your offensive tempering instead of gorilla bonuses. For runes then, in your actual rune words, we want to avoid legendary runes so that you have a good chance of actually being able to gather them while leveling. So first we have a combination of the Seer rune, which gives you offering for casting skills before going on a short cooldown, and we tie that to the Gar rune, which gives you a stacking critical chance bonus, which helps our early crit chance a fairly large amount. Then we have the Zan rune, which gives you offering for casting an ultimate skill, which we do more frequently than most ultimate skills for most other classes, and we attach that to the Sick rune to invoke Concussive Stomp for free whenever this triggers. Past that, we have our Mercenary choice for the build as well, and this depends on whether or not you have the unyielding hits aspect. If not, you want to go with Subo, so head down through the Ready at Hand passive here, which gives you bonus movement speed after damaging an elite, which is lovely for our actual general speed of traversal. Then we go through Cover Fire to pick up Opening Fire, which gives you an extra 25% critical strike damage multiplier against enemies that are hit by cover fire for 4 seconds afterwards. For the reinforcements, I recommend Varyana using Earthbreaker for just some free extra knockdowns and effects like that to be triggered basically on cooldown, which you can do by having it cast anytime that you use a skill personally. If instead you have unyielding hits aspect actually active on your gear, you want to use Rahir as your main mercenary instead of Subo, and when doing this you'd want to go through to the Rahir's Guard passive here, which gives you 15% bonus armor, which then translate into bonus damage through the unyielding hits actual aspect. Then we head through Provoke over here, which taunts enemies, into Mocking Lure, which gives you bonus damage against any enemy that is taunted by Rahir, and I recommend the same reinforcements regardless of which main mercenary you go with here as well. Finally then we have our first 28 Paragon points, just for an idea of where to put them as you first breach into the endgame, and we want to head up and over through the Prime Rare node over here, which gives you a bunch of bonus damage as well as bonus maximum life, which is nice. We go up through the actual dexterity nodes here to get specifically to the Glyph socket itself, inside of which, ideally, you would be putting the fitness glyph. This gives you additive bonus critical strike damage, and the additional bonus also gives you vigor regeneration whenever you critically strike an enemy, which is extremely useful. We then are going to be picking up the dexterity required to activate that secondary bonus, as well as picking up the rare and magic nodes of note within the radius, which is just a sort of lovely addition here. Then we head up and out the right side of the board up like here, like so, and attach on the viscous shield board, which will be positioning with the actual legendary node itself on the left side, as it is by default. And with that, with the remaining points you have to spend, we'll just be putting them to start off the second board, on which your goal is to actually get to the viscous shield node itself for the bonus damage while you have a barrier, and of course the glyph socket, inside of which we'll be putting the hubris glyph for a bonus effect from the actual magic and rare nodes in the radius, which are all critical strike damage, which is going to be extremely good for endgame Spiritborn this time around, as well as of course bonus damage while you have a barrier, as we will always have some level of barrier, and so this is just a nice bonus to have as well. That just about does it for our leveling build for Spiritborn in Season 8 then everyone, all of the skill points, the order that we take them and why, some pretty detailed explanations for that, then of course everything else that you need to know to get the most out of this as a leveling build setup for Spiritborn in Season 8 of Diablo 4. I hope you've all enjoyed this, and hopefully you enjoy using this build as you get started in Season 8 in just a couple of more days' time. Like if you liked the video, subscribe with the notification bell for more. Most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.